Trump official inside the Trump administration. A worst-case scenario of a government upside down, where the staff works to contain the craziness at the top. The senior official has written an anonymous op-ed in tomorrow's New York Times describing him or herself as a member of the resistance inside the Trump administration. Referring to numerous like-minded Trump officials, the administration official writes that we believe our first duty is to this country, and the president continues to act in a manner that is detrimental to the health of our republic. Quote, that is why many Trump appointees have vowed to do what we can to preserve our democratic institutions while thwarting Mr. Trump's more misguided impulses until he's out of office. What could be the most powerful anonymous letter since American diplomat George Kennan published his historic telegram outlining the Cold War strategy of containment. But rather than attempting to contain a foreign power, the author in this case makes clear that the objective now is to contain the worst impulses of a sitting U.S. president. Quote, we are trying to do what's right even when Donald Trump won't. This isn't the work of the so-called deep state. It's the work of the steady state, close quote. Well, the op-ed also takes direct aim at President Trump, stating, among other things, that the root of the problem is the president's amorality. Anyone who works with him knows he is not moored to any discernible first principles that guide his decision-making. It says that President Trump's impulses are generally anti-trade, anti-democratic, and that Trump engages in repetitive rants. And his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed, and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back. Wow. Reacting to the developing story late today, the president offered his view on Twitter, writing, quote, one word, treason. I'm joined now by Michael Schmidt, Washington correspondent for the New York Times, Zerlina Maxwell, director of progressive programming for Sirius XM Radio, Phil Rucker, White House bureau chief of the Washington Post, Joyce Vance, former U.S. attorney, and joining me now by phone is MSNBC political contributor Steve Schmidt. Steve, you've been on the inside of the political capsule. You know what it's like to be under somebody running the country. What is it when a top official, apparently, according to the Times, a senior administration official, has come out and said this guy is reckless, and it's only we working under him have kept him from destroying the country?
Well, Chris, it is an extraordinary and historic op-ed. They referenced John McCain at the end of it, and my first thought was to think about John McCain's stories as a prisoner of war in Vietnam and the comfort that the prisoners took when they were able to establish through the isolation of their solitary confinement communication with the other prisoners through tap code through the wall. And so the first thing I'd like to say as someone in the resistance on the outside is thank you, and it is nice to hear from you, but it is not enough. We are in an hour of national emergency in this country. That is evidenced by the president's behavior and erratic behavior that we see in public every day, by the account of this op-ed, and, of course, by Bob Woodward's book, a journalist of the highest standards and reputation who has distinguished himself over a lifetime of meticulous reporting about how the powerful act. We know that this administration is vile, corrupt, and likely criminal. We know that this president is immoral, that he is mentally and intellectually unfit for his office. What I would say back to the author of this op-ed is that this resistance inside the administration, whomever they are, must now gather. And one of them, the best of them, the toughest, the hardest, the most credible, must come forward into the light. They must take the full step, and they must tell the American people the truth, because the American people deserve to know. We are a nation of 325 million people on a planet of 6 billion. And this vile, immoral, corrupt, indecent, dangerous, intellectually unfit president is a danger to all of us. And they have an obligation to the country, to the Constitution, to every American patriot from Nathan Hale on, Nathan Hale, who said, "I regret only that I have one life to give up for my country." We're not asking them to do that. We're just asking them to come forward and tell the truth. The truth in a moment of crisis that's different than the emergency. And the crisis is the political cowardice in the country, acute in the Republican Party, where not one person will step forward and say enough is enough with his assaults on objective truth, on the rule of law, on liberal democracy. Enough is enough with his fetishizing autocratic dictators around the world, assaulting and assailing our allies. Enough. Who will step forward? That question now is foremost in my mind reading this. We need someone in the public to tell the truth.
Let me go to Phil Rucker on this, and then we're going to go to Steve Schmidt, Michael Schmidt, the straight reporters here. That passion was real. I want to get and check this out with you guys who cover the White House. Does the voice that we read in the New York Times op-ed piece that's running tomorrow, the inside top administration official who won't identify himself, apparently is a him, according to the Times in their introduction, talks about the question, here we are, the issue here. Is this a White House being kept in control by its people under the president? Are they controlling the president in a way that's saving the country as they see it? Phil Rucker of the Washington Post.
Yeah, well, Chris, the column in the New York Times is extraordinary, but it does fit the pattern that's been shown through many months of reporting, and including Bob Woodward's book about this president, about this White House, about the lengths to which senior officials around the president have gone to try to contain his impulses, to try to reverse damage that they fear he could do to the country and to national security. That is very real, and it's created a real ripple inside the West Wing this evening. People were canceling meetings and huddling behind closed doors to try to strategize about how to deal with this. The president's anger was described by a key source to my colleague Ashley Parker as volcanic this evening. He is very upset. He views this as a treasonous act of betrayal by somebody in his administration, and there is a hunt underway to find out who this individual is.
Let me go to Michael Schmidt. It seems like, the way I read it, I did follow, of course, what Michael Wolff wrote in January about this White House, the chaos within it, the failure to meet even normal standards of competence. Then we got Omarosa's book, a book basically from a fellow traveler of the reality television world who came with Trump because thanks to Trump. Then we got Bob Woodward, the best investigative reporter, coming out with this book next week. We've got pieces of this week. This article in the New York Times tomorrow, an op-ed in the op-ed page, looks to me as a confirmation of everything we've read from working our way in from Michael Wolff to Omarosa to Bob Woodward. And now we're inside the White House, an actual high administration official saying everything you guys have been saying is true.
They're all chapters in the same book. But there's even a better example more recently, which was his tweet over the weekend. He's under investigation for obstruction of justice. He knows they are looking at his tweets. They know that Mueller's looking at his relationship with Sessions. And what does he do? He tweets about the fact that Sessions has not done his job by allowing these Republicans to get charged. And that is
the two U.S. Congress people who have been indicted, yeah.
Correct. And that runs so much in the face of obstruction of justice.
Well, he believes, because he acts like he believes, that the purpose of the Justice Department is to carry out his political will.
And he has continued to behave that way since he came to Washington, never adjusting his behavior to the norms or the laws of Washington.
Well, hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.